I've reached the point where I'm about to read you Ezekiel Kralen's weekly installment of his story about originally the two little dogs, but now it seems to be all about legal difficulties and the rent arrangement with a blah blah realty and the manager and slipping checks under the door. How to Pay Your Rent in 1,000 Painful Steps is the title of this particular installment of the story. Ezekiel Kralen wrote, Email correspondence, May 16th and 17th, last year. Subject, my email from this morning and my attorney's response. Date, May 16th. First, my message time, stamped 9:38 a.m. Subject, new development. This sign was posted in the hallway yesterday. Please pay rent checks in number 204. Any questions, please contact Cortez Garciac, Garciak, 415, and then X's instead of the numbers for the rest of the phone number. So it looks like we have a new manager, at least temporarily. It also suggests there is no other way to pay rent except by slipping a check under the door. I have second thoughts re-rent payment. I hope I'm not being overly cautious here. I would first like to see evidence of my 10-month payment cashed by a blah blah, along with my April payment before I submit this month's rent, which former should show up in my escrow account and the latter in my own checking account. Plaintiff's attorney said to assume that a blah blah has my check, though not yet deposited. I just examined my online bank records, which still do not show April's check cashed. I find that assumed statement elusive, seeing as he should be able to quickly discover for sure where that check is or if it's missing. He also did not reply regarding an arrangement with the building manager to text acknowledgement of receipt. Thanks again, Magdalena. Signed, Ezekiel. And her reply time, stamped 4:37 p.m. The check for the trust account was sent to the landlord today. The landlord's attorney is saying that they don't have the April rent. Do you remember what date you slipped that under the door? I followed up with the landlord's attorney on the arrangement we suggested for texting acknowledgement of receipt, but the landlord's attorney said he had to get back to me about that, but to assume that it was okay. Once I hear back from you, I will reach out to the landlord's attorney again to get confirmation about the arrangement. Date when you slipped the April rent under the door, if you remember, and to double-check if Charles is the new building manager. Was it always Unit 209 where you slipped the check under the door? Finally, my response time stamped 6:20 p.m., so she'll read it tomorrow. I slipped a check for April's rent under the building manager Kevin Bond's door on the evening of April 19th. Same day you emailed me a copy of the dismissal. His apartment number has always been 401, definitely not 209, which is just a room like mine, no kitchen, no restroom, and around the corner from me, it now says office on it. That unit's been vacant since the previous tenant died there about 1.5 years ago, so maybe that check is still in Mr. Bond's apartment, misplaced somewhere, or tossed out inadvertently or otherwise. Who knows at this point? It's a clown show. Plaintiff's attorney previously said you can assume that a blah blah has my check for April's rent, but in his latest communique he said he doesn't. And now he says you can assume the texting arrangement for proof of receipt is doable. That remains to be seen. I do not know who this Cortex Garciac person is. I don't think I've ever met him, but if I did, it was just in passing without talking to each other. There was a constant influx of building workers here and other service people, especially since the new elevator is undergoing the final step in getting it up and running, after almost a 2 years wait since the old one broke down. Again, thanks. I'm presently recovering from a bout of plantar fasciitis, which suddenly struck yesterday afternoon and almost left me stranded at Trader Joe's, but I managed to hobble home, so it occurred to me this morning, if I am to slide a check under someone's door, whoever that person may be, at least I won't have to cope with climbing 2 flights of stairs with an aching foot. Subject, today's email to my attorney, date May 17th, afternoon. Begin. Subject, another update. Looks good. Cortez Garciac is not the manager. He is a young fellow assisting our maintenance man, Victor, but has been assigned to straighten out the missing check debacle. I know this now because he came to my door just a little while ago with Victor to ask about my April and May payments. I explained to him in a nutshell my situation and that I'm working this out with my attorney. Adolfo explained that April and May checks are missing for other residents too, and he has been asked to look into it. So he jotted off on a printout of residence, talked to attorney beside my name, and thanked me for my patience. So he now realizes my payment is in the process of being straightened out between my attorney and opposing counsel. The exchange was amicable, and we now know that I am not the only one with this missing check issue, which is certainly a relief. Adolfo also started to explain that our building manager, Kevin Bond, is ill, but I cut him off, told him I understood perfectly and have no anger over this, but every sympathy for his medical condition. He said the missing checks are probably somewhere in Kevin's apartment, but he's not privy to going in there to search for them himself. In short, so I do know who Cortex Garciac is, and he's a very nice fellow. I asked about receipts, and he said his method is to cut a receipt for each tenant after he gathers up all payments, but he'll be glad to give me a receipt for both months immediately. Otherwise, he'll deliver receipts to all residents this Friday. I'm comfortable with this, so if you give me the go-ahead, I'll hand Cortez my rent for April and May later today or tomorrow. Thanks again. Subject: a lovely evening with Deke and pups. Date, May 17th, evening. My plantar fasciitis has simmered down by yesterday morning, thanks mainly to the treatments I applied to my ailing left foot, as instructed by Bob and Brad, the two most famous physical therapists on the Internet. But for 2 days, I really wasn't amenable to marching up and down the stairs, so I hoped that Deke wouldn't show up until I'd recovered at least somewhat, and that's exactly how it went down, Watson. By yesterday afternoon, I was feeling my chipper self with barely an ache in my heel, and then Deke and Furry Charges arrived about 9:30 p.m. Perfect timing, especially since I had just finished my dinner. Coincidence? I think not. He knew when to keep away, being the bodhisattva guardian he is. I was 2/3 of the way through watching that delightful movie, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for the second time, the first time years ago. When Deke called up to my window, the pooches were already off-leash, while the leashes were on but not tethered, so the moment I appeared at the gate they ran up in eager greets, hopping about with delight. "Well, hello there, my angels," I spoke while maneuvering through the open gate so they wouldn't dash inside. But it looked like they weren't going to do that anyway. They were just so happy to see me. Deke had already laid out a generous heap of found clothing for them to rest upon, so I brought them back to that spot before kneeling down and showering them both with hugs and kisses, a fine prelude to what turned out to be a splendid evening from start to finish. Now get this, Watson. Deke even had little shirts for the doggos. Lucky's was an orange and black Giants t-shirt, and his sister's was light blue with a nursery rhyme about the cow and the moon in dark gray script with images. I must have died and gone to heaven was all I could think. But if such really occurred, I surmise it was on the afternoon of April 21st when I had my LARC-capade, LARCapade, for that is when my life truly took a turn for the better, though maybe the truth is we all die and go to heaven every night, and we just need to wake up to that epiphany. To be continued.